term priorities, which would also be addressed within the 2023 budget prioritization framework, would include the repair and rebuilding of public infrastructure, including schools, health facilities, and housing, restoration of economic infrastructure, including ports, bridges, roads, and rail networks, support for businesses, especially SMMEs, agriculture, retail, manufacturing, and that would also include informal sector, and then optimization of social support and public employment programs, and then critically also building resilience to better prevent and respond to future disasters. And departments will then be requested to prioritize these interventions as part of their budget submissions for the upcoming budget process. And that would also be then part of their 23-24 annual performance plans. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Grizel. Honorable members, we'll go now to the monitoring and evaluation, wherein the department provides support in developing and implementing systems to monitor, to track implementation of intervention, whether they are being implemented, the results that are being achieved, and the way in which we facilitate timely corrective measures to ensure accountability, transparency, and also as a way of enhancing public trust. There's work that's done on monitoring the relevant structures, because we are also concerned about the capability of the state to respond quickly to events like this, but also the speed with which that is done to make sure that there's timely intervention that have the right impact. This capacity support that is provided, there's a slide where we'll highlight this, but also conducting frontline monitoring visits to assess experiences of communities in terms of receiving the required support and tracking of the results. The picture at the bottom of the slide is what guides our thinking around the tracking of the results, because everything that's done must lead to certain results, which is then reflected in the next slide. And this particular formation or articulation is also informing the way that the engagement between DPME and COGTA is going in repackaging the interventions to understand the results that we are trying to achieve with the intervention. Firstly, on the input side, that there must be clear accountability of the type of resources that are being deployed to the whole intervention. In terms of government funding, the capacity support that has been provided, including what other provinces and municipalities have actually provided, for example, in the KZN region, for the rescue search effort, the contribution by development finance institution, the non-government sector, and the in-kind support contribution. Things have to be clear in terms of who has contributed what and when. There's engagements that have taken place around how to better understand the donor contributions that are being made, and whether important questions around how to ensure that these donor funding and donor contribution are equitably distributed in communities that have needs. There is a proper balance of that. Contribution of the international sector as well. But also the whole list of activities on what is being done. This is about tracking that what has been promised that it be done actually gets done, and the kind of outputs that are achieved. For example, the restoration of essential services. For example, water, opening of roads, restoration of telecommunication networks, whether people are actually getting the social relief of distress where they should, what is the uptake across that. And then on the results area is the when you're trying to assess whether things are getting back to to normality. Businesses are actually operating, people are, kids are going to school, those kind of things. This is the articulation that COGTA has also adopted in structuring the reporting mechanism. Now, we're going into specific examples of what has actually been happening on the ground. The DG DPME engaged with KZN Province, DG, and also Department of Science and Innovation, where in week 1, to assess the capabilities there, it was agreed at that stage that the Council for Scientific and Industrial Research, apologies the spelling mistake there, CSIR, has been brought on board starting from the 21st of April to build an information system that integrates various data initiatives that were in place so that it can provide a regular report to support strategic oversight and decision-making by various structures at national and also local level. That system has been developed, and it's going to be supporting the oversight structures and coordination structures with regular reports and information, plus also support communications and providing information to the public and enhancing transparency. And there's already consideration at this stage that how can this be replicated in the Eastern Cape, Northwest, and also Northern Cape to see how we can standardize indicators for reporting progress and on the disaster interventions. And then the scoping work that's taking place around frontline and citizen monitoring visits, where we'll be doing spot checks on temporary shelters, and also to understand citizen feedback on how they're accessing and experiencing the interventions of government. At the bottom of the screen, we put a picture there that shows that whereas we go to the sites, this system has been tested very well recently with the COVID-19 interventions. We go and assess what's actually happening on the ground. There are good things that are happening which become recorded as good practice for replication and scaling up, but also where there is poor performance, that is noted, but speedily escalated to the relevant authority to attend to them. And where alternative interventions required, that gets mobilized. Sometimes you find that things don't happen because of decision-making problems, poor delegation, and things that can be resolved through meetings. So that's facilitated. Sometimes it's that things are just not known. So we bring this to the attention of the relevant authorities to attend to. As will be seen as the result of the minister's intervention. Minister visited KZN, Minister in the presidency, Honorable Gungubele, visited KZN and engaged with the province on the 5th of May. In that visit, the minister engaged various departments, also visited, engaged with the Durban Chamber of Commerce and Industry, and also visited the Port of Durban, Prince Misheni Memorial Hospital, and sent a team to Umlazi to visit some places, social sector places there, including a school at Imizweni High School. As an outcome of that intervention, because there were a number of discussions that were taking place with various officials. A summary is provided in this slide to say there was a water supply challenge at Prince Misheni Hospital. Certain critical operations couldn't take place in the hospital just because of lack of water. But immediately with the interventions that took place, by Monday the 9th, water supply had been restored. There was a intermittent supply, but it was insufficient. The water pressures to supply the hospital was not sufficient for them to perform certain things. But on the 9th, we got a report from the CEO that water has been restored, and a week later, they even confirmed that water supply indeed restored, but then sustained. So things have stabilized and they have gone back into full operation in that space. Then another case of the KZN Provincial Pharmaceutical Supply Depot. There was flooding there that caused electricity disruption and damaging of files and other things. So the challenge there have not really been resolved by the 20th of May when we did the follow-up, and the province is appealing for a national level intervention on the set of challenges that have been identified. These have been escalated to the provincial authorities and the National Department of Health, but still need a follow-up. And then other challenges that have been noted. Operational challenges at the various social facilities, including the shelters. These have actually been discussed with the social sector groupings. There's a grouping called the Outcome Delivery Forum, which includes the Department of Social Development for attention. And then DSD is facilitate relevant interventions to address the immediate challenges that have been noted. For example, the supply of mattresses, the heating systems, food supplies, and all this kind of things. So those are being attended to. But also what we pick up is that the longer people stay in these shelters, new problems start creeping in. So a process of how to plan for the exit of these families from the shelters back to their normal lives need to be better managed. So Department of Social Development will be implementing what we call a real-time monitoring tool to understand the conditions of children and their families as to what needs to be put in place to enable their reintegration into their normal lives. That work is being done together with the DPME. And then there's work on the Durban port, the economic effects of the disruption at the port. DPME will be doing a diagnosis study on that to not only to look at the issues of now, because interventions to restore operations are being, but with a longer term view as well, to say what are the strategic policy options for the future when we look at the Durban port, given its significance as a trading facility for not only South Africa, but the continent as well. Then there are a set of interventions in the infrastructure space. Some of them can be sorted out in a space of months, but others will take quite a long time. There is a monitoring mechanism that will look into these spaces, the restoration of water, bulk water supplies, electricity transport, the work of PRASA and the Port of Durban. Now, in terms of the recommendations, big recommendations around infrastructure are that project plans that are being developed here should include proper timeframes and completion periods to make sure that there is effective monitoring and then a mechanism to deal with duplicated activities. For example, a priority that's identified in for example, a road access road for tourism may be reported also for agriculture and may be reported by the Department of Transport as an intervention, but there needs to be a mechanism on how to actually integrate these things and make sure that there are no duplicated activities in terms of estimation of the damage and the cost of repair, but also taking into account the causal factors that we have outlined earlier on. Going forward, there needs to be proper balance between compliance to legislation such as environmental impact assessment and the the other recommendations that are provided in this particular slide. To conclude, the Deputy Minister, Pinkekana, will be visiting Northwest on the 24th of May, accompanied by the Deputy Minister of COGTA, Human Settlement and Health, and 3 other MECs in the province will receive them. They will be meeting with the traditional leaders and the briefing by the community in deal plan, which has been submerged underwater due to the rain. They will also do walkabout as part of launching the frontline visits. So when they leave, already because they are DPME officials on the ground, there is work that's taking place to understand the conditions of the people and what need to be done better. Reports will be produced to make recommendations about where interventions are actually required. Minister, this is the last slide. We'll hand over to you to conclude. And thank you, Honorable Chair and honorable members of the committee. Thank you.
Thank you very much, DDG. Chairperson, that's how far we go on presentation. And we are awaiting the response of the honorable members.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Honorable Minister in the Presidency and your team, Honorable Gungubele. We'll take this opportunity. Let me take this opportunity now and give it to my colleague who's the co-chair. After you have given this detailed presentation with your team so that he can handle the issue of deliberations. Honorable Frolik, my co-chair, let's have the part of the deliberations. The program is taking us up to what is happening today. We can see that there are some deputy minister and some other colleagues on the ground today. Honorable Frolik.
Oh, thank you, Honorable Nyambi, and good morning, honorable members, and also to the ministers and the members from the different provinces of the executive that are here. And thank you, Honorable Minister, to you and your staff for a very comprehensive and detailed presentation in terms of the approach on the 3 key areas that the President has identified on how government will approach and deal with the natural disaster and as it is unfolding. I now want to invite the honorable members who are on the committee to indicate their preference to ask questions of clarity or to comment on the presentation, and I will recognize them in the following order. The Honorable Tim Broutestedt, the Honorable Kalipi, the Honorable Mente. Those are the 3 names that we have, as well as the Honorable Dikeledi Dereko. So it's in that order. The Honorable Broutestedt, you are first, sir.
Thank you, Chairperson. I appreciate the opportunity, and thank you to the department and the minister for the presentation. Chair, I would like to just take the presenters to slide 5. And I'm mindful that the President has encouraged us not to get involved in the blame game, and this is certainly not intended to be anything like that. But slide 5 is very important of the presentation because it gives an analysis of causal factors. So I'd like to get some clarity around these and start with the following 2 questions. The first question is, there are 8 areas of concern raised by DPME relating to the causal factors that have been picked up. I'm not going to go through them again. So the first question is, are these assumptions made by DPME, or are they actual findings picked up on the ground since the April floods? That's the first question. And if they are actual observations picked up on the ground by the department, can we please get a breakdown or an amplification of each one of them? There are 8 areas of concerns. I'm not saying that they should be given to us right now, but through you, the 2 co-chairs, I'm sure that the committee would be greatly assisted by, for instance, getting a breakdown on rapid urban development without climate change risk mitigation design controls. And then, for instance, the issues of adherence to the SPLUMA, which is the Spatial Land Management and Use Management Act, really comes down to planning at the end of the day. And then, for instance, poor maintenance of infrastructure, including roads, bridges, stormwater. I'm sure that the committee would be put in a great position of knowledge and information power if we have breakdowns of each one of these 8 areas where we picked up failures, so that we can work with the individual municipalities to try and improve those systems so that we can avoid a future disaster. The disaster has happened. I'm pretty sure that we're all interested in making sure that we plan for the future to try and mitigate against such a disaster going forward. So the reason is not to have a go at people. Time for accountability, I'm sure, will come later, but is to try and plan now. And when we just have the 8 things presented in one slide, we have no level of detail on each one of them. So I'd like to request that. And then I'd like to request, I'd like to know from DPME whether this is just a reactive finding on their part in these 8 areas, or have they been engaging with the municipalities involved, for instance, the eThekwini municipality, over a period of time and warning them that they've picked up that there is poor maintenance of infrastructure, including roads, bridges, stormwater, sewers, dams, and retaining structures. Are they just saying this now, or have they raised those issues before? If we could just get a much greater level of detail on that particular slide, that would be useful. And then just the next slide, Chair, I don't want to carry on too long. The coordination and institutional arrangements. It's good to see this organogram. I think we'd like to dig into it when we're on the ground, but I think what would be very useful here is that obviously we know that the chair, we know who the Minister of COGTA is, but it would be useful for the committee, especially those of us who are from the provinces on the ground dealing with the fallout on a daily basis, to get names and contact details of each one of these persons that are part of this organogram. At the moment, they are just headings, and they don't allow us to contact people on the ground saying, look, this is a problem here. In order to work with this organogram and to work with the people, the actual human beings who are filling out this organogram, I think the committee would find that very useful, and particularly the members of the committee that actually are on the ground, working day to day, trying to help resolve all these issues. Chair, I'll leave it at that. Thank you so much.
No, thank you, Honourable Member. The Honourable Kalipi.
Good morning to you, Chairperson, and good morning to colleagues. Chair, I'm welcoming the presentation as well. I have just a few questions, it's not many. I have a question in regards to the slides that talks about M&A system, which talk about spot checks on temporary shelters, relief packages, and so on. My question, Chair, the department, what is the time frame? Because on the very same slides, they're talking about to identify, to analyze, and to intervene. So according to my knowledge, as one person from KZN, particularly in eThekwini, I think the department is still on the analyst stage. They've identified, of course, they've analyzed, but they have not intervened as such, because people have not get any kind of information in regards to the help. I just want to get that clarity from the department. Secondly, I have compared presentations from COGTA KZN and COGTA nationally in this presentation. I just want to get a clarity in terms of numbers. For instance, DPME is saying that there are 54 missing people reported, while the 2 presentations from KZN and from National COGTA talks about 88 missing people reported. Also on fatalities, The department is talking about 443, while the COGTA National is talking about 448. So now I just want to get a clarity. Can we go with their numbers, or must we take the numbers from COGTA National? I know that they are still going to do the presentation here, but just to clear the confusion, which one must we take with? The last one, Chairperson. On the one of the presentation, I think under key intervention one, I agree with the latter speaker to say that if we can get details on what has been done so far, because it's something else when we receive presentation here, which is beautiful on papers, but it's something else when it comes to the matters on the ground. I just want to get a clarity when you talk about roads and bridges, urgent repairs and so on. And I'm saying this, Chair, because in one of the presentation is going to be shared that there's a particular school, which we do have an information that the president of the country even visited that school during April, and the school does not have a bridge, and it affects teachers, it affects students as well. And that bridge has not been reconstructed as we speak. Bridge to secondary school, which is the only secondary school in the area. So now I want to check with the department if they are saying they are also having a clear organogram under coordination and institutional arrangements. How is that institution arranged in terms of to coordinate these things to be done on the ground? The last one, Chair, in this one, I have also noted on the last presentation, on the last slides of the presentation, that the Deputy Minister Kekan will be visiting Northwest with the Department of Health. I just want to get a clarity because in KZN, was this department, is any of the minister or political head of the department was part and parcel of the visit that took place with the Department of Health? Because in Ward 44, people chased the Department of Health away. They were saying that they are coming wearing suits, they are so insensitive to them, and it was there on the news. So now I'm also worried if the Deputy Minister is going to Northwest with the Department of Health on what happened in KZN is not going to happen there. So can we get a clarity, Kuti? Was the department involved when that thing happened, when the officials and the members of the portfolio committee of Department of Health was chased away by people? Was the department there? And then what happened after that? Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you, Honourable Member. And as you have also indicated, the COGTA presentations is still coming. The Honourable Mente.
Thank you very much, Chair, and good morning to the colleagues. Chair, I just need one clarity. And I think more questions with this particular information is still going to come back when we receive the department COGTA both provincially and nationally, because there seems to be no synergy within the work, and that's going to be very problematic. Now I need clarity, just one clarity in one place. It's slide 24, and these slides should be speaking to the key interventions. After you have given us all the key interventions, I think they take about 3 pages. On 24, you go on to say the interventions will be taking place in phases. Now I want to know, which phase are we? What has been done? What has been assessed? What's your monitoring? Are we moving or are we not moving? And then what will constitute phase 2? How far are we if we are in phase 2 already? Because the floods were over a month ago, and we do not know whether we're going or coming. That's the clarity I need. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Honourable Member. The Honourable Direko.
Thank you, Chair. Let me first start by welcoming the presentation and acknowledge the work that has already been done by our government. Chair, we are still within the COVID, and what we have witnessed in terms of COVID spending in our different government departments and municipalities was bad. Prices were high, and we also have some serious allegation of corruption which were taking place during that period. So some of our people saw COVID as an opportunity to loot instead of it being a state of disaster. Although we appreciate the fact that not all our officials are corrupt and not all of them are bad. However, now we are facing another disaster in a form of flood. So what mechanism does the Office of the Presidency have in place in order to protect the public purse from those who may want to take advantage of the current situation? And secondly, Chair, when we look at some of the causes of the disaster are as a result of poor planning, failure to maintain our infrastructure, and poor management, which is also not affecting this province alone. So going forward, what is the plan in order to resolve some of the challenges that may caused by poor spatial planning, lack of sectoral plans within our municipalities? And people have been placed in a very bad area, which is not conducive to live in, such as your wet place and clay places, which shows that we are lacking on doing simple things such as geotech before we can place our people. So what is the strategy that the Office of the Presidency is going to use going forward in order to avoid this situation from repeating itself? And then on the expenditure to date, have the Office of the Presidency made sure that all the procurement that were already been done now are in line with the law? And have they also put measures in place to ensure that everyone is working according to the book? And lastly, Chair, one of the weaknesses that we have experienced on this disaster is lack of communication. So I would like to check with the Presidency if is there any measures in place to ensure that people get information and knows who to contact for what, and also to ensure that we have a proper coordination in terms of everything that is going to be implemented in all these affected areas. Thank you, Chair.
Well, thank you, Honourable Member. Honourable Members, once you have made your intervention, you can just lower your hand. I've noticed there's a number of other members who want to participate in the question and clarity session. However, I'm now going to give an opportunity to the Minister, and the Minister can allocate responsibility as to who will respond to some of the questions. But over to you, Minister. There were 4 interventions, and we would like to hear what your response is. The Honourable Minister.
Thank you very much, Honourable Chair. And I must also thank the honourable members for the engagement, starting with the Honourable Brauter and Honourable Mukalipi, Honourable Mente, Honourable Dereko, and Honourable. Yes. I think the major question hits the point that we've tried to upfront to indicate that one thing that we have seen as we intervene, as the intervention is taking place in this exercise, are the capacity gaps in a number of areas. As a result, a number of areas has been the catch-up work. And against that background, I'm very much, I do respect the interventions by the province and COGTA against that, but I will request John Mashamba to first and the technical team to respond to all the technical issues. And then once they are done, I'm going to come and DG.
Thank you, Minister. Thank you for also the honourable members for the questions that have been raised. I will deal with some of the questions and allow my colleague, Dr. Anna Grisa, to come in, particularly on the issue of the causal factors and how they interface with the question that have been raised on that. With respect to the data on the slide that was mentioned around the numbers, our slides from DPME are dated. The data was on the particular date that's indicated on that slide, I would advise that the latest information that is being provided by COGTA should be the one to be used, and the latest also information that's provided by the KZN province must be the one. But DPME plays a particular role also in that space, that sometimes you find that we may not have the most latest information as of yesterday. There's a lag in terms of the information gap that we may receive, because some of the information we derive from the reports that are there. That is a clarity on the numbers. So I hope that the presentation of COGTA and KZN would actually clarify that issue. Then the issue of the roads and bridges of where the president has visited, it's a question that we can make a follow-up and understand where things are. I don't have a specific information on that particular issue. The same with the the issue that you've raised about the Department of Health being chased away. We don't have the specific details of that engagement, so we can follow up and understand that. In terms of the phases, the activities, the phases, I think in the main are meant to describe the arrangement or the packaging of the whole set of interventions. They happen at the same time. Phase one really deals with the most immediate issues of humanitarian assistance, but at the same time, which I hope that the two other presentations will clarify, at the same time you'd find that whereas immediately people that have been displaced from their homes are being provided with suitable, safe accommodation through the shelters, there is interventions to make sure that there is a building of the TRUs, temporary residential units, and also provision of support to rebuild their homes, which takes a bit of time. But people must then at the same time be provided with the basic needs they have, shelter or food and humanitarian support, while the process of rebuilding is taking place. That's one of the examples that one can pick in terms of how these interventions are being administered. But others, for example, a rebuilding of infrastructure like a bridge might require not only a short time of a week, but while planning for it is actually taking place right now. Rebuilding the actual build of that infrastructure would take some time to come on stream and be restored, to restore access to that places. So I will hand over to Dr. Grizel to deal with the other question on the causal factors.
No, thank you. Before you hand over, there's just a request that I need to bring to the attention of the members and the participants in the meeting. This meeting is being broadcast live on different platforms. And if you are in a position to switch on your camera, please do so, so that we can clearly see who the member or the office that is delivering the question or the response. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm requesting to leave my video off because of connectivity issues. Let me start by discussing the issue of the analysis of the causal factors. And I think these are very, very critical that we do further unpack them and provide further detail. And I'm sure as DPME, we can certainly do that. But just to say that this is a high-level analysis of the causal factors, drawing from a number of discussions that have been held, but also drawing from the existing challenges that have been identified by DPME and others over time. So, for example, many of the issues around, the inadequate infrastructure maintenance, I think that, that is something which has been identified over time, as well as responses on how to address that. But I think just broadly, the whole issue of infrastructure planning. So the Infrastructure South Africa is a very important response to that identification of weaknesses within the infrastructure planning and implementation space, and that includes the development of the National Infrastructure Plan, which should be addressing these. But many of these are also in infrastructure maintenance at a municipal level. There would also be the issues of spatial planning. So the Spatial Planning and Land Use Management Act is the responsibility of the Department of Agriculture, Land Reform and Rural Development. And a lot of work has been done in that regard. The National Spatial Development Framework has been approved, and it's a priority now that it should be implemented, but there's also spatial planning imperatives at different levels. In some instances, spatial plans do indeed exist and are developed. However, the adherence to those spatial plans is inadequate. And, we know that there have been concerns about a lack of, this uncontrolled settlement in areas that are inappropriate for human settlement, such as is indicated here within the flood-prone areas. And that's not only, that doesn't, as has been mentioned, that does not only occur within KwaZulu-Natal, but also in other areas. I think even Dilpan would face similar issues. Then there's another whole set of issues around, are we adequately preparing for climate change? I think there are various strategies and documents that government has produced there. The Presidential Climate Commission has done a lot of work. As DPME, we have been also engaging with the Presidential Climate Commission to look at how we can improve the integration of the proposed responses and interventions in the short, medium, and long term within the planning system. So I think those are the issues relating to the causal factors. I think let me leave it at that for now. Thank you.
Maybe to add, Dr. Chris, the Minister, the question around the role of the DPME in making sure that we counter the risk of corruption. I've mentioned in the presentation, thank you, Dr. Chris, the establishment of the Oversight Committee that is led by the DG Presidency, in which is going to be supported also by activation of a proactive audit by the Auditor General of South Africa. So that work is going to be assisting the process of making sure that the monies that have been put in place are actually used for what they are meant for. And then the other point, just to add, is that various departments have done on the part of the expenditure. Various departments have done or are actually doing a reprioritization of their budget in favor of the disaster response. But already there are allocations that some department would have already put in place for disaster management, which they would mobilize for this purpose. National Treasury is in a very better position to report about the overall picture, but also the next presentation by COGTA may also touch on the issue of what funds have actually been applied for under the disaster relief and what has actually been deployed in that space. that is the way that we can respond to those questions. Thank you very much. Over to you, Minister. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Didi Mashamba, but I would ask you, maybe you or Dr. Crystal, Didi Mashamba, because Honorable Mentor raised a question about which phase are we, how far are we, and she preceded that with time frame. Maybe I would want you, DDG, to speak about the metric system framework which we tabled before COGTA, with an intention to actually request population of that, on the basis of which these answers are easy to answer once that is done. If you can speak on that, Dr. Mashamba.
Yes, Minister. I don't know if I'm requested to put up the slide again.
No, the metric system, which we shared with the COGTA with regard to how best to populate.
Yes.
Following intervention timeframes and so on, and by only when that is populated fully that we're able to deal with that. Can you just, if you want to share it?
Okay, I'm disabled from sharing. I will just talk through it. That there is slides, if honorable members have it on their packs. Slide number 26. On the bottom of that slide, it indicates the results chain, starting from the understanding of input, which is the contributions that are being put in place to manage the disaster, and then the activities to be implemented, outputs up to the impact. And in the next slide, slide number 27, that slide actually breaks things into phases. Phase 1 on the first top line, phase 2 on the second row, and phase 3 on the third row. What happens in practice is that whereas phase 1, which is the provision of immediate humanitarian relief, need to be implemented immediately. Ideally, you would want this to be done as fast as possible. But at the same time, while a provision of immediate humanitarian relief is taking place, there are interventions that are implemented for phase 2, for stabilization and recovery, for example. So some of these interventions take place at the same time, but what we are able to report now is that this framework that DPME has provided has become a point of engagement with the COGTA and NDMC colleagues in how various interventions can actually be mapped. You would find that in the reports that are going to be presented by COGTA and also KZN, there are indicators of progress on a number of these, on phase 1 activities and also phase 2 activities. For example, the restoration of essential services in the provision of water in certain places, whereas in other places, there is still, in terms of bulk water supplies, but in other places, we'll still find that water tankers are still being used. People are still in the shelters, which is part of the humanitarian relief of phase 1. Thank you, Minister.
The point, honorable members, were trying to make is that we have introduced a metric system, that one which even called for time frames. Until that metric system is fully populated, we can confidently come here and say in the entire spectrum of intervention, for instance, how many people are out of shelter? What is an intervention intention? And when will this be finished by when? Those who don't have access to water, there are many interventions that have been done in KZN. We've seen that. All what we require now is a metric system that is population of the metric system that helps us to answer the question Honorable Mentor asked in detail in terms of time and everything. So we are working then with COGTA to actually populate those interventions in a manner that helps us to answer the question Honorable Mente asked in a more concrete and easily verifiable, what we call. You will find
Honorable Minister, we seem to have lost.
Have you lost me?
No, please proceed, Honorable Minister. Our apologies, just for a while we lost the connection.
Okay, all right. All I'm saying until that matrix, which calls for time frame, area of intervention, need all identified areas for interventions. What is intervention? What are the time frames? Until that matrix is fully populated, which I think the DG for DPME now in KZN is also working to ensure that we populate that matrix. It is not the absence of intervention, is what we need is those interventions in line with that matrix so that in concrete terms we can be able to respond to the major question Honorable Mente sort of raised. Let's come back to Honorable Browder-Seth. I think there's been an attempt to respond to that question of causal factors. I dare say there is no dispute across all our institutions in South Africa about those challenges as those causal factors are raised. Most of them are common factors. For instance, if you go, for instance, on the maintenance of infrastructure, AG would have reported on a number of times on those. The Minister of COGTA would have spoken about those. The Minister of COGTA would have been interacting with local government on a number of those. But those issues during this disaster have actually come to confront us. For instance, if you go to KZN, you look at the Minister of COGTA has spoken several times about this. You look at a number of areas, I'm just forgetting the number, go to Claremont and so on, where people's houses are in soily hills, which once there is a rain, that water is absorbed and that turns into mud. Now, amongst other key things, when we talk about phase 1, phase 2, there's a temporal shelter, but phase 2 and 3 deals with seeking suitable land and whose intervention takes what to call a longer time. All I'm saying is that to reinforce Dr. Grissa, to Honorable Browser, yes, the breakdown on those will have to be what to call presented. Now, there was other question that, are we reactive in observing these or proactive? And I think our answers will tell you there's been a both element of proactivity and an element of reactivity. Honorable Mkarepi spoke about, I think that question has been answered on the comparison of numbers, that on day to day, we don't suck the numbers. On that day when we were there, these are the numbers we came across, and on and ongoing. Some of these numbers, on the first day of disaster when we were there, numbers have been changing. If you can check the death, how many, and later whether they went to 300 and something and so on. Those things have been happening as we were actually checking houses damaged and so on. So that information is an information that continues to move. That's why I agree with DDG that the latest presentation today by COGTA is the one that will have to be relied upon. And DG on DPME, Mr. Nkuna, when he comes back, he will also actually ensure that we check the alignment of what he has seen and what has been presented. So far, unless we have missed anything, Minister, Honorable Chair, we are ready to correct the gap that we have left. Thank you.
No, thank you, Honorable Minister. And as you've indicated that some of the issues overlap with the presentations to follow later today, there are another round of hands, and I want to recognize the Honorable Mashego, the Honorable Soma, the Honorable Schlengwa, and the Honorable Dodovu. And then thereafter, we'll take the other hands that are still on the platform.
Before you acknowledge those hands, can I make up a point quickly, Honorable Chair, if you don't mind?
Yes, you may.
Thank you.
Yes, you may, Minister.
Yes, on the just to strengthen this point, that the President would have upfront spoken about ensuring that we avoid what happened in 2020. The oversight structure that deals with that, it brings together, which is chaired by DG in the presidency, DG Baleli. It brings together Treasury, it brings together the presidency, it brings together AG, it brings together, although that is still being populated, it brings together the oversight elements in the civic society, where AG is going to do what we call the real-time assessment, like having a common page with regard to what principles should be followed in tendering. AG is not going to determine who tender, but the principles and the ground rules, so that as ASG follow a number of transactions as they are being implemented, follow those transactions, check if in line they actually are informed by the principles that are commonly understood. That work is already in place. A few days ago, I did speak to AG. They also showed me, they told me that already they are following transactions, but they are better placed together with the Treasury if the Ad-hoc committee have a session with them. I thought it is important to say that. Thank you, Chair.
Chairperson, just to
yes, Honorable Kalipi, yes.
Is the minister going to cover the question I asked regards to health visiting after the deputy minister is going to visit the Northwest and avoid what happened in KZN?
Honorable Minister,
we will check the facts on that, Honorable Chair. I'm very careful. We don't follow every detail of what has happened in the KZN. We will check the facts on that, but it's an important question.
No, thank you, Honorable Minister, and we will await the outcome after you have ascertained the facts on the matter. I now want to recognize the Honorable Mashego.
Thanks, Chairperson. Thanks, Chairperson, in the meeting. The Chair, I want just to ask questions, general questions, rather than be specific. Look, to the minister and the team, the most especially the executive, don't you think that because the presentation by the minister and the team cut across all departments, rightfully so, because they are the presidency. Now, is it not that a problem that the presidency come and present on behalf of the home departments or the home ministries that are supposed to still come and report, to a level where if we contest the input by the presidency, where will we go? Because if the ministers come and present and we are not happy about their presentation and so forth and so on, our recourse should be the presidency. In this case, the presidency is the presenter or the home ministry in presentation. Isn't it that a little bit odd? That being the case, Chair, maybe I might be answered, I might be wrong, moving from a wrong premise. I do not get a sense, and I think that we are no longer at a surprise flood or disaster. We are in a disaster. So at some point, we need to move from a purpose of us planning to respond to the disaster. Though I know that the disaster you don't plan for, but this one is already a disaster that took place 2 months ago. We should be having a plan to respond to this disaster. And don't rely heavily on the real-time audit in order to respond. Minister Gungubele has given us something that I think is workable, the metrics of the plan and the expected outcomes. If we can have that, rather than getting a report that account as and when things happen. For instance, if we are going to build roads, what is the plan of how much the budget? Where will you get the budget? That when we audit, because we are a small team to be factual, when we audit, when we get the audit, the audit must be measured against the commitment made in the plan that has been agreed upon. The when I was with the mayor, with the minister as the mayor, we always have something called predetermined outcomes of what we need to have. What are our predetermined, given the floods and the situation we are in KZN, Eastern Cape, and what is our predetermined intentions? And if we have them, how much are they going to cost in our view? How much did they actual cost after the real-time audit has happened? I thought then we will not go all over the show. We'll come and say on roads, you committed to build these roads. Where are we? How much have you spent? How much are you still going to spend? What are the bottlenecks on hospitals? And so we can be in a position to deal with that as and when we deal on the metrics that Honorable Gungubele have spoken about. But that should be at the departmental level rather than to be at the presidency level, because you must avoid double dipping of the budget and double dipping of the responsibilities, and especially if it even involves the presidency. It is becoming too big for it to be challenged, because once you challenge the presidency report, it means you either can go get a recourse at court, which we are not intended to do, but with the presidency should be the ultimate in terms of the responses and the accounting of the departments, of the ministries, in my view. As I'm saying, if I'm off the hook, I'm ready to be taken on board and called into order. But that's my view. Thank you, Chair.
No, thank you, honorable members. Just to say that this ad-hoc committee decided to issue an invitation to the honorable minister in the presidency to give us the overarching approach of government in dealing with the matter, and line functions issues as the information become available will be shared and will interact with the different line function departments as well. The Honorable Asoma.
Thank you very much, Honorable Chair, and good morning, colleagues and honorable ministers and your teams. Chair, I will avoid a risk of repeating what has been asked. Safe to say that the first one is to appreciate the presentation. At least we do have a sense of comfort that the government, through the presidency, is alive in terms of the state of disaster that we find ourselves in. Secondly, Chair, I'm sure the presidency also is much alive that it seems like this flood disaster, it's a moving target. Like this weekend, we had another floods that has also done a further damage in people's lives and belongings. The first one, Chair, that I would like, which will relate to the metrics that the minister spoken to, is that I'm sure, Honorable, through you, Chair, Honorable Minister, the quality assurance of restoration of whatever infrastructure has been damaged will take place so that we avoid the repeat of this year, which will also, the restoration of the infrastructure will take into account the, what you call it, the climate change challenges that it brings. The other one, Chair, I'm not too sure whether it's going to be COGTA, but I think the presidency then, as correctly as Honorable Mashiko have stated, I will raise the issue that also if they can ensure and advise the implementing departments to ensure that the engineering feasibility study in terms of the suitability of the land that would be used in terms of recycling those communities and businesses, that it's a suitable area, then we're not going to have the similar happenings. The second last one, Chair, I think the minister has spoken to, but also it talks to, not borrowing from his words, the issue of the spatial planning. Is it now the opportune time for us as the government to revisit together with the communities, the spatial planning and educating our communities as well? in terms of identifications of land, pieces of land that human beings can settle on. Is it not the opportune time? The very last one, Chair, the DDM, I thought the Minister, Honorable Gungubele, also was going to talk to say his department or his observation. Does it give us a sense of comfort that the DDM it's working? I don't want to make reference what Honorable Mashiko have raised, but this is the ideal time from where I'm seated, that the DDM model in terms of better coordination, so that we avoid the stampede in terms of the oversight of various department and executive and everybody else. Hence, in Parliament, we took a posture that says that probably committees that were scheduled for oversight in these provinces must hold on a little bit until the establishment of this committee. Hence, the question of, or the comment that was made by Honorable Kalipi, for me, I'll stretch it further that April, for somebody who doesn't have a house sitting in the hall that is also flooded this weekend, it's very impatient with us. Which best mechanism, I think all of us need to put our brains together, that the metrics must have the clear targets, it must be measurable, and also simplifying the communication that we do, because it seems like we're using the mainstream communication platforms, forgetting that the communities that we want to reach out in terms of communication of what we are trying to do as government, they don't have radios or TVs and anything, their house belongings. So they might not necessarily hear us. Probably we need to move out of our comfort zone and say of government, how best then we reach out jointly working together with other spheres of government. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you, Honourable Member. I now recognize the Honourable Schlengwa, followed by the Honourable Bedovo.
Thank you very much, Chairperson, and co-chairpersons, and to the Minister and the delegations this morning, honourable colleagues. Chair, I think many of the issues have been raised. I just want to probably zoom into two areas in the main. One, of course, appreciates the presentation, and it's very high level academic nuances which are present, but I think our major dilemma, Chair, is translating all those things into tangible, practical action steps on the ground. And so my issue is that turnaround time seems to be very slow. And the risk of a slow turnaround time in dealing with issues is that the disasters are unabating. If you're looking at what has happened this past weekend and will continues to be a threat to KwaZulu-Natal specifically. Just this morning, I was supposed to be meeting with the mayor of King Cetshwayo district. He has had to cancel the meeting I was supposed to have because he has to be like boots on the ground in anticipation of what may hit that district. So I raised this matter, Chair, to say I think the high level academic nuances are well noted, but I think where the minister and the presidency in a state of disaster really needs to crack the whip in ensuring that things are done, because they're currently not happening. That's the first part. And of course, I think Honorable Losoma is right in saying that people are impatient with us because they continue to be living in halls. There's still a difficulty in accessing home affairs and so on and so forth, just for them to put together at the bare minimum some semblance of their lives, and that is not happening. And now the disaster is catching up with us. So that's the risk of inaction, and that we're dealing with the phenomenon we don't know. The second point, Chair, goes to the issue of the matrix, and also in ensuring that people at departments actually do what they're supposed to do. And I want to make an example of the N2 northbound in the Umgababa area, which by the commitments of the Department of Transport, the N2 should have reopened last Sunday. It has not happened. and the current reigns are now going to take that process back. But see, Chair, the issue now is the pressure on the alternative routes is roads which are not conducive for travel, and therefore literally making travel between the South Coast and accessing Durban to be very, very difficult. So the point I'm trying to make, Chairperson, is that there has to be a paradigm shift insofar as the thinking is concerned, because it needs to go to practicality and implementation. And I think one would derive a better comfort from the minister insofar as timeframes, turnaround time, and ensuring that the major issues which are a hindrance to the economy and to sustainable livelihoods of our people are dealt with speed. eThekwini specifically is seemingly just not coping with the extent of the disaster. And I think, Minister, the final point is to say have the funds been made available to the provincial government and to the municipalities? And if not, why not? And if yes, at what point rather how much, and where are we with the transfer of those funds? Thank you very much, Chairperson.
Now, thank you very much, Honorable Slengwa. The next intervention will come from the Honorable Dodovu. I understand, Honorable Member, you have difficulty with your connections.
Yes.
So
yes, that's correct, Honorable Chair, but I will try my level best and to even be quick in my intervention. Okay. Firstly, I joined the queue to welcome the presentation, which is quite substantive, and it does show the level of work that government is engaged in, especially on how it is structured, the systems that it put in place, and how it seeks to ensure monitoring and evaluation of the whole thing. Now, I'm only going to traverse two issues, Honorable Chair. The first one relates to the budget. What is quite important in this particular instance is the fact that there is a framework that the government has issued that all the departments at a provincial level and national level must readjust their budgets and retable them in the light of what is happening here. Two months ago, we wouldn't be sitting here talking about these floods, and I'm quite happy that this intervention is happening, that in the light of the fact that this disaster have paralyzed the budgets of the provincial governments as well as the national government, there is a need for this readjustment and retabling. But what is not clear, Honorable Chair, is what about the municipalities? It's the presentation said nothing about the need for the municipalities to do the same. I'm raising this because it is quite important to avoid overlapping and duplication of activities, of funding, and all of that. And municipalities, especially big municipalities like eThekwini, the expectation is that they must also readjust their own budget so that this becomes an all-offensive way of ensuring that we salvage the situation and at the same time we help the people that are in distress and reconstruct the areas affected. For me, that is quite important, but I didn't hear the presentation talking to how municipalities would then follow suit by readjusting and retabling their budgets in line with what is going to happen at the level of the province and national. The second issue, which is the last one, Honorable Chair, is the coordination outside government. Yes, in government, it's quite clear how this whole process is coordinated, the role of different departments in this particular instance. But what about the external organizations, the NGOs, the churches, the CPOs, the labor movements, and everybody else who's outside government? For me, that is quite important because if you do not establish a proper linkage with those particular institutions, the possibilities that the information can get out of hand or it can be distorted or there could be unnecessary conflict that can be avoided. And for me, I don't see it coming up because what is clear and in the media is spelled out in precision that these organizations are playing an oversight role in relation to what is happening, whether it is on the matters of budget, the program, the activities, and what government does to ensure that it salvages the situation. And I like that in the presentation on how that coordination and communication will be fostered and will be strengthened with those institutions. For me, that is quite important. And I'm sure maybe I'm missing something, but I think an explanation is needed in this particular instance. Thank you very much, Chair.
No, thank you, Honorable Dodovu. The Honorable McPherson.
Thanks. Thank you very much. So I just wanted to start off with some of the comments by the minister saying that, you know, that we weren't ready for something like this, to use his words. And I think to some extent that is true, but to a larger extent, this is exacerbated by the collapse of local government, and more particularly in eThekwini. And this is the crystallization of years of mismanagement, years of documented corruption, years of politicians getting away with that corruption, and ultimately, you know, people's lives could have been saved if where money should have been spent was in fact spent on infrastructure development instead of lining the pockets of the connected few. And I hope that when you know, the department and the presidency and the president himself look at this, hopefully this is a catalyst and a spurring on to deal with the disaster that is in local government. That is a state of disaster in itself, and what has been allowed to be done in local government, because people have had to pay for that with their lives. So the DG spoke to where the responsibility and coordination lies for the disaster, and that lies within the executive, and he eloquently painted out the different structures of that. And it struck me, Minister, that there is an extreme disconnect between what may be assumed in government and in cabinet and by yourself and the department, and the realities of what is not going on in this disaster. Because the notion of coordination and management is hypothetical right now, because there is no management or coordination. Just by way of an example, the executive committee in eThekwini met yesterday. They still cannot tell anybody who is actually managing the disaster within the city, or who they're even supposed to be talking to in provincial government. And if the executive committee and the mayor doesn't know that or cannot provide answers for that, I would submit to you that with respect, what you assume and what you believe may not necessarily be accurate with what is taking place on the ground. And I think that in the hurly-burly of trying to sort these disasters out, I worry, and it's not even a worry, it's my belief, that what is being fed to the executive is not true at times. And they are saying things in local structures to appease their bosses higher up in the road. And that for me deeply worries me. So you set out the three-step approach of humanitarian relief, rehousing people, restoring services, and then reconstruction. And I think the Honourable Mente is getting close to what we're looking to understand is when does one period end and when does one period begin? Because let me give you some examples, because if we may be in stage 2, how long are people supposed to stay in halls? There are 40,000 people that still remain in community halls 6 weeks later. How long are they required to stay there for? What services are being given to them? And if the restoration of services like bulk water and sewerage is supposed to be part of that, when is that supposed to be completed by? Because still today, there are 300,000 liters of sewerage that is overflowing or spilling into waterways and into groundwater in eThekwini 6 weeks later. And so again, I'm not convinced that there is a correlation between what you have eloquently put before us today and the realities of what is taking place on the ground. Because we, as local politicians and someone who lives in eThekwini and who's a member of parliament from KwaZulu-Natal, I have an extreme difficulty in getting hold of this information. We have representation on the executive committee in eThekwini, and that information is not available in the executive committee. So if it's not available there, where is it available actually? With your discussion around budgeting, and this is what really worries me, is that essentially the cost of the disaster is being left up to a reprioritization of budgets. That's essentially what it comes down to. There's no new money, as I can see, or from what I can understand in your presentation, being made available to the province. So if that's the case, then government must admit then there's going to be a heavy toll on frontline services, particularly in education and healthcare, if money is going to have to be reprioritized to deal with infrastructure and housing. But then that begs the question, what is the point or the goal of a national state of disaster if it is not to make contingency reserve funding available, and if it is only about reprioritizing the budget? So again, I think that there's a disconnect between what the public's been led to believe and what the comments by the president himself said, that there was going to be R1 billion made available. That seems to be not the case now, that it is mere reprioritizing of funds. But if it is about reprioritizing of funds, where is and what amount sits in the contingency reserve, and why is that not being made available to the province? I'm glad you said that someone from your department is on the ground trying to understand what's happening. And to some extent that is good, Minister. But I want to encourage yourself and your officials to get as many different views as possible, that what may be necessarily told to you by a mayor or a city manager or a municipal official may actually not be entirely true. And I would hate to see yourselves being misled by what is not taking place. Because ultimately, at the end of the day, that is going to, if we are not seeing progress made by, as Honorable Nkuliki had said, that people are going to become more and more restless. And trust me, they're becoming more and more restless by the day. So I'd be grateful for your responses. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you, Honourable Member. Honourable Minister, I now leave it up to you and your support staff to respond to the interventions. There was a lot said about budgeting, as well as the timing of the response plan, translating what is envisaged into practical steps in the turnaround time. Over to you, Honourable Minister.
Thank you very much, Honourable Chair. Let me again thank the honourable members for their frank interrogation of this report, for their robust and frank interrogation of this report. Honorable Chair, I want to say up front, when we deal with the matters of this nature, there are issues that we will subject ourselves to accountability on issues of facts. We cannot disagree on facts. We have to fight hard until we are on the same page on facts, because there's nothing ideological about facts. There's also nothing ideological about proper intervention on a disaster, and especially the one we're dealing with. I just want to say, I felt I must start with Honorable McPherson. The issue of capacity is no longer a debate, even in the executive, that this magnitude of a disaster has exposed our capacity gaps. So a lot of interventions, therefore, we make will actually signal that. Having said that, I do not want to go back to other various subjective issues that Honorable McPherson addressed. We've spoken about that. This government has acknowledged a number of those in a number of fora and a number of reports that were put in public. But the challenge we're faced with now, which I think is the intention of the Ad-hoc committee, is to work together to turn around the situation in KZN. So the issue of capacity is no longer a debate as a gap. Honorable McPherson speaks about, maybe the other point I must come quickly on, Chair, is that I want to restate this issue. There's a series of interventions that are taking place in KZN. Even when the Ad-hoc committee goes there, you'll get the report from the Minister of COGTA. All what you are worried about as DPMA is the population of the matrix that will demonstrate each area of intervention, like Honorable Mentor asked, each area of intervention, what time is anticipated, both from the point of phase 1 of relief and point 2 of stabilization and the third phase of recovery. Timeframes that matrix is going to assist, which we are working with COGTA to deal with in the disaster center. Until that is filled, we will comfortably brave South African as the DPME. Just to give you one example, something I didn't want to do. For instance, as a matter of fact, at my disposal, unless it's proven otherwise, the report I have is that in TRUs, 1,800 TRUs are supposed to be placed. We are very far behind on that. We have not even reached 200 on that. So, but the matrix, once populated, will assist us to be comprehensive and be able to escalate where necessary. So that's the matter we're patiently working on. And whatever time then, the time it takes to fill it, it also speaks to that capacity, what to call gap. And the coordination that under the leadership of Minister Nkosazana is being improved and oiled to deliver what is necessary. I thought, let me make this point again so that if this question comes again, it should actually come to this point. Let's come to the funds. And I think I'll try to put this matter to bed once and for all if I succeed. I know undoubtedly that the Minister of Finance has said there's 1 billion contingency fund, which is in the coffers of Treasury. This is a fact. This is not a theory or anything. But the minister would have said, department, infrastructure departments, whenever there's a budget allocation to them, there is a portion for contingency situations, for disaster. Once that is done and finished, they are expected, therefore, to access the 1 billion. That is mainly targeted, honorable members, to phase 1 relief. There is a calculation that is ongoing. We're being assisted in particular by the KZN government under the leadership of the Premier to give us an assessment of multi-billions that are going to actually cost us in dealing with the KZN situation. Already, no less than 25 billion is a provisional assessment. There is a different response to that when you deal with phase 2 and phase 3, which medium and long term. So in other words, we don't want to confuse these issues. 1 billion for immediate intervention is there. Once an infrastructure department has actually used what is traditionally allocated to them, they have to access that. So I think I'm trying to the best of my ability to close that. And I hope Treasury on Wednesday will even articulate it better than I do. But I want to make this point, that contingency fund exists, right? If we go to Honorable Mashiko, we nearly are at a risk of discussing what comes, whether it's the egg or the chicken. Ours being here as DPMA was to display to this committee how are we independently as the Department of Monitoring and Evaluation in the Presidency assisting in the situation in terms of streamlining issues, making sure that planning is also coordinated in a manner that it is capable of being monitored and evaluated. That's what the metric system concern is. And that one, it doesn't matter whether we come after or come before. It's always going to be our job to do. I thought that is what we are doing. And again, what Honorable Mashiko is raising, what is predetermined to be realized, again, is on the population of the information as structured by the system we are proposing to be populated, and so on. And we are going to work hard that in a short space, that's why our DG Nkuna is in the KZN now, is to make sure that we succeed in the population of that metric so that we report squarely and clearly across the board on minor and macro issues, on micro and macro issues. And I thought that point needs to be made. So the issue of the ultimate cost to Honorable Member McPherson, I've attempted to answer that. Let's go to Honorable Lesomo. The quality of assurance again is going to depend, once we have populated the metrics of what are we responding to, how are we intervening, each item from onset of intervention, when is it intended to be completed, then the issue of quality assurance in the evaluation column is what is going to be attended to by DPMA. Of course, working together with line function institutions, with some of them having quite significant engineering skills. On the spatial issue, I think DDG spoke about this. It's a major issue. And especially when we sat down with the Devonport team, especially from the Department of Transport, as they were showing us the intervention in reconstructing the Bayhead Bridge, how the one lane is a crisis, it must be opened, and at the same time demonstrating that the impact and the implications of the fact that trains are not moving, especially the freight rail. One of the major things they showed us, which the DDG I think was trying to speak about, was to show us how informal settlements are encroaching on the rail line. How vegetation, as they try to do that, they remove vegetation and soften the soil along the rail line. And in so doing, put the rail infrastructure at risk. Those are some of the issues that talk to the spatial plan and also need to emphasize the principle of legality in South Africa. So the question that therefore Honorable Soma is raising, is it not the time that we speak with citizens? I have no doubt. Education aspect of it is going to be very critical, in particular as it comes from GCIS. We need to have a package that is sustained, because the issue of legality, it cannot only depend on the police. Actually, the main advocates of a successful legality should be the citizens, and the police come to complement. And we need to turn around that. And therefore, the issue of Honorable Somo, or is it not the time that communities, and I think that time is long overdue. On the DDM, Minister KwaZulu-Natal, I mean, will speak on this, but we work together from the TPMB because we also have a role on the steering committee around this. The little answer I can give here, this disaster has demonstrated the significance and the urgent need for implementation of the TTI. That's the answer I can give you. Because a lot of issues that we're dealing with, had that system been in place a long time ago, would actually be in a better place with regard to that. And Honorable Shlengwa, yes, there are academic elements, but we are explaining at what point are we going to be able as TPME to be concrete, but this is not fully, there are also parts of academic what to call. I think the road of the issue of N2 is an issue TPME will have to follow up. If you say it was supposed to have been opened last Sunday, and the delicacy of continuing in a long time to lose the alternate route, it's a fact that TPME will have to follow and actually make our pronunciation on it. The issue of paradigm shift is agreed. Yeah. And then I've explained the issue of funds, because even Honorable Dodov is speaking about funds. The issue of civil society, which Honorable Dodov is speaking about, I think in speaking about the oversight unit which the president directed it be placed, it's been placed, which is being chaired by DG Baleni in the presidency. I have already said in my opening that that comprises of Treasury, AG, also the component of civil society, which is being attended for population, to say who represents labor, who represents business, who represents civil society, and so on. That is being worked on, because the president made a clear direction that we cannot afford the mishap of 2020 in as far as funds are concerned. And we're trying our best in as far as that is concerned. And I think there is a cooperation across all the institutions and our colleagues. DDG fill up the gaps the minister would have left?
Thank you, Minister. From my side, there's nothing to add. You have adequately addressed the issues. I don't know, DG Krisa?
I'm covered. Minister has comprehensively responded. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Chair.
No, thank you, Honorable Minister, and also thank you to the honorable members who have made the interventions. And may I once again thank you for your availability on this Monday morning, Honorable Minister. We are aware as an ad hoc committee of the important task to exercise oversight, or as the mandate from the two houses of parliament indicate. And you correctly state that there could be an interpretation that this presentation was a bit academic, but it's important for us so that we can undertake our oversight from the structure that the government, the structured approach that the government is putting in place in the interventions as the president has articulated. We are aware that this high-level analysis, of course, will not provide all the detailed answers to the questions that has been asked. But as the Honorable Broterseth has inquired, we can request the details around some of those 8 areas of assumptions and or findings that has been made. We are looking forward this afternoon, of course, to the interaction with COGTA, where a number of the questions that members have asked on specifics will be dealt with by the Minister. We are aware, Honorable Members and Honorable Minister, in your input, you have referred to the oversight structure that has been put in place in government and that is being led by the DG in the presidency. That includes also the Treasury, the Auditor General, and so forth. I must inform the meeting that we do have a slot for Wednesday afternoon with the Minister of Finance, also followed then by the Auditor General, when we will go specifically into the budgetary issues, reprioritization, getting access to the R1 billion, as Minister Gungubele have said, and also looking at some of the other safeguards that has been put in place when it comes to procurement and also the expenses related to that. The Honorable McPherson made a number of interventions, as well as the Honorable Asoma, And what is important is for us, honorable members, is to get to KZN and to do a real-time assessment of what the intervention of governments is. And that assessment will be in the form of an oversight visit that will take place to the affected areas this coming weekend. We'll start there on Friday and conclude our work on Monday afternoon, Monday evening. But we are in a better position now than we were before, so that we get this an idea of the magnitude of the challenges also that our people living in the affected areas, not only in KZN, but also in parts of the Eastern Cape and Northwest are experiencing. And we look forward, Honorable Minister, to further engagements on this matter. We implore you that if there are any relevant information, especially in terms of the matrix, that be made available to the Ad-hoc committee so that we can familiarize ourselves with it. It's always better when you do oversight that you are focused and direct and clinical in terms of what is being said, what is being done, and what is being achieved, so that we also know where in this phased approach where the government are to make the interventions as being required. That said, honorable members, the next presentation is scheduled for 12:30, and that will be with the Minister of Cooperative Governments and Traditional Affairs. I don't want to disturb the program now because it's likely that the Minister have other engagements on until that time, and we will thus adjourn this meeting and reconvene at 12:30 so that we can get the input from COGTA. And we'll ask also that our colleagues from the provinces who are on the platform, and specifically those that are seized with the matters in the affected areas from COGTA, those MECs be available for the 12:30 meeting as well. The meeting stands now adjourned. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Honorable Chair.
Chair.
The agenda was put on the group, honorable members, who will start again at 12:30 today. That's in just more than an hour. At 12:30, we'll start with a presentation from COGTA. Thank you very much. Thank you, Honorable Minister.
Thank you, Honorable Chair. Thank you very much. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you, Comrade Chair. Honorable Chair.
Recording stopped.